I knew something was wrong the moment I stepped off the military transport plane. The familiar weight of my pack against my shoulder blades, the lingering scent of aircraft fuel clinging to my uniform. Everything felt the same, except for a hollow ache in my chest that had been growing since that last video call with Marcus. 10 months in a combat zone changes you. I went from Lieutenant Rebecca Harlow to a woman who could sense betrayal in the air like an approaching sandstorm. Marcus wasn't there to greet me. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. He's probably just running late, I muttered to myself, scanning the crowd of families reuniting with their soldiers amid tears and laughter. I checked my phone. Still no messages. Just the same silence that had been haunting me for the past 3 weeks. I hoisted my duffel higher and walked towards the taxi stand, ignoring the pity in the eyes of my fellow soldiers as they embraced their loved ones. The taxi driver asked where I was headed. 1478, Lakeside Avenue, I replied, the address rolling off my tongue with the comfort of home. The place Marcus and I had bought 6 years ago before my 3rd deployment. Our dream home with the willow tree in the backyard and the small dock where we'd planned to teach our future children to fish. You sure about that address, ma'am? The driver asked, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. My stomach tightened. Yes, why? No reason. He shrugged, but his eyes held something back. The familiar streets of Lake Conway rolled by as we left the base behind. Spring had arrived while I was gone, coating the neighborhood in a flush of green and blooming dogwoods. Everything looked so peaceful, so unchanged, as if the world had been on pause while I was dodging mortar fire and patching up wounded soldiers in the medical unit. "Stop the car," I suddenly commanded as we turned onto Lakeside Avenue. There, in front of my house, my home, stood a realtor's sign. Sold was plastered across it in bold red letters. I fumbled for my wallet, threw some bills at the driver, and stepped out, my legs unsteady beneath me. The willow trees still swayed in the spring breeze, but something was different. The blue shutters I'd painted myself had been replaced with sleek black ones. The garden beds were filled with unfamiliar plants, and through the front window I could see a woman, dark hair, slim, laughing, arranging flowers on what looked like a new dining table. My dining room table was gone. I must have stood there, for 10 minutes frozen, my duffel bag digging into my shoulder. I didn't even notice when the taxi pulled away, leaving me stranded in front of what used to be my life. "Can I help you?" The voice startled me. The dark-haired woman was standing on the porch now, her expression curious but guarded. "This is my house," I said flatly, the words sounding hollow even to my own ears. Her eyebrows drew together in confusion. "I think you must be mistaken. My husband and I bought this place 3 months ago." "Your husband," I repeated, the pieces starting to align in a picture I didn't want to see. "Yes, Marcus. He's at work right now, but—" The rest of her words faded into a dull roar as blood rushed to my ears. Marcus. My Marcus had sold our home and moved this woman in while I was deployed, saving lives in a desert halfway across the world. "I'm Rebecca Harlow," I managed to say, watching her face carefully. "Lieutenant Rebecca Harlow, Marcus's wife." The color drained from her face. That's not possible. Marcus and I have been married for over a year." She twisted a diamond ring on her finger nervously. "He told me his ex-wife was stationed overseas permanently, that you'd divorced years ago." I laughed then, a broken sound that scared even me. "Well, that's news to me, because last I checked I was still very much married to Marcus Reynolds. And this house," I gestured to the property around us, "is still half mine." The woman, I didn't even know her name, backed up toward the door. "I think you should leave. I'm going to call Marcus, and—" "Please do," I interrupted, dropping my duffel bag on the lawn. In fact, I insist. Her name was Vanessa, interior designer, 32. The same age as me, but with hands that hadn't held pressure on a bleeding soldier's wound, skin that hadn't been scorched by the relentless desert sun. She'd met Marcus at a charity gala 19 months ago, while I was on my previous deployment. The affair had started immediately. I learned all this sitting in my own, former living room, perched on the edge of a cream-colored sofa I'd never seen before, surrounded by photos of their wedding. Marcus in a suit, Vanessa in white. Their hands clasped over a cake that looked like it cost more than my monthly military salary. "He told me you were divorced," she repeated for the third time, her voice smaller now, her initial confidence crumbling. "He showed me papers." "Forged, then," I said flatly. I never signed divorce papers, never even discussed divorce. I pulled out my phone, opened my photos, found one of Marcus and me from before my deployment. We've been married for 8 years. I've been on 4 deployments. After each one, I came home to him. Vanessa's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, God," she whispered. "The deployments. He told me those were business trips, that he worked for a defense contractor." I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Marcus is an accountant at Miller & Ross. Has been for the past decade. He's never worked for a defense contractor. The front door opened before she could respond. We both turned, and there he was. My husband, briefcase in hand, tie loosened at his neck. He froze in the doorway, eyes darting between Vanessa and me. For a split second, I saw fear in his eyes. Then, remarkably, he smiled. "Rebecca," he said, as if greeting an old friend. "You're back early." I stood slowly, my combat boots solid, against the unfamiliar plush carpet. "No, Marcus, I'm right on schedule, just like I've been for every deployment. You know exactly when I was coming home." His smile faltered. He set his briefcase down. "Vanessa, could you give us a minute?" "Don't you dare," I said to Vanessa without taking my eyes off Marcus. "Don't leave this room. You deserve to hear every word of this." "Rebecca," Marcus started again, his voice taking on that soothing tone he used when trying to talk me down from a nightmare. "I know this must be confusing for you, but—" "Confusing?" I cut him off. "No, confusing is when someone changes the furniture around. This is fraud, bigamy, theft." I took a step toward him, and he flinched. "You sold our house. You married another woman while still legally married to me. You took everything we built together and erased me like I was nothing more than a bad memory." "I can explain," he began. "Save it for the lawyers," I snapped, pulling out my phone. "I've already called JAG. The military doesn't look kindly on this sort of thing, Marcus, especially when it's done to a deployed soldier." His face hardened then, the mask of concern dropping away. "You're barely even here, Rebecca. Gone for months, years at a time. What did you expect? That I'd just sit around waiting forever? You chose the military over me, over us having a family." "I chose to serve my country," I said quietly, dangerously. "And you chose to betray me the moment I was gone." I turned to Vanessa, who was silently crying on the sofa. "I'm sorry you got caught in this, truly. But that wedding wasn't legal. And this house?" I looked around at the transformed space that no longer held any trace of my existence. "This house was purchased with my VA loan. My name is still on the deed. He had no legal right to sell it." Marcus laughed, a cold sound. I'd never heard from him before. "Good luck proving that. The sale is final. The money's gone." "Gone where?" I asked, something clicking into place. Marcus had always been careful with money, sometimes bordering on stingy. We'd argued about my military salary going to my mother's medical care instead of our savings. Yet, here was a house full of expensive new furnishings, and Vanessa was wearing designer clothes. He didn't answer, but Vanessa looked up, her mascara smeared. The investment, the prison. What prison? I asked, my eyes still on Marcus, who had gone. Very still. Hawthorne Correctional, she said, her voice steadier now. Marcus invested everything in buying shares of it. He said it was a guaranteed return. Private prisons are booming, he said. A cold certainty settled over me. How much did you invest? Marcus? His jaw tightened. That's none of your business. Actually, it's exactly my business. Half of everything you have is legally mine, including whatever you invested in this prison. The house sold for $425,000, Vanessa said, ignoring Marcus's glare. He put in another $200,000 from savings. My inheritance from my grandmother was about $300,000. She twisted her wedding ring. It gave us a controlling share, almost 51%, nearly $1 million. Half of which was effectively stolen from me. Marcus's face had gone from pale to crimson. Shut up, Vanessa. You don't understand what you're saying. I understand perfectly, I said, the pieces aligning in my mind. You embezzled my half of our assets to buy into a private prison, with money that wasn't yours to spend. You were never coming back, he suddenly shouted, making Vanessa jump. You kept re-enlisting. Every time your service was up, you signed on for more. We were supposed to start a family, and instead, you were halfway around the world, playing hero. I was serving my country, I said evenly, and saving lives. What were you doing, Marcus? Besides committing fraud and sleeping with other women? He lunged toward me then, but I sidestepped him easily. 10 months in a combat zone had honed my reflexes. I grabbed his arm and twisted it behind his back in one fluid motion, forcing him to his knees. Don't, I warned, my voice low. You really don't want to add assaulting a military officer to your list of charges. Get out of my house, he hissed through clenched teeth. I released him and stepped back. Not your house. Not legally. I picked up my duffel bag. But I will leave. For now. I looked at Vanessa, who was watching the scene with wide, tear-filled eyes. I suggest you get a good lawyer and a forensic accountant. Captain Winters at the JAG office listened to my story without interruption, his weathered face giving nothing away. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. That's one hell of a homecoming, Lieutenant Harlow. Yes, sir? He tapped his pen against his legal pad. You've got a solid case for fraud, bigamy, and illegal transfer of assets. The fact that you were deployed when all this happened makes it worse for him. There are specific protections for service members. I want everything back, I said firmly. The house, my share of our savings, and whatever he invested in this prison. Captain Winters nodded slowly. The house and savings should be straightforward. The prison investment is more complicated. He shuffled through the notes he'd taken. Hawthorne Correctional, you said? Yes, sir. Something flickered across his face. Interesting. He reached for his computer keyboard and typed rapidly. Hawthorne has been on our radar for a while. There have been allegations of prisoner mistreatment, inadequate medical care, overcharging for commissary items. What does that mean for my case? It means, Captain Winters said, turning the screen so I could see a news article about Hawthorne's legal troubles, that your husband and his girlfriend might have invested in a sinking ship. I scanned the article, noting phrases like federal investigation and potential criminal charges against management. If Hawthorne goes under or faces major legal action, that investment could become worthless, Captain Winters explained. Or worse, they could be liable as shareholders. I sat back, processing this information. So Marcus didn't just steal from me, he invested in a corrupt prison system. Appears that way, Captain Winters confirmed. But there might be an opportunity here. He leaned forward, his voice thoughtful. If Hawthorne is forced to restructure or sell, and if the court agrees that you're entitled to Marcus's share of the investment, I caught his meaning immediately. I could end up owning part of a prison. Potentially a controlling interest, based on what you told me about the percentages. He studied me carefully. What would you do with a prison, Lieutenant Harlow? The question hung in the air between us. What would I do with a prison? The image of my house, transformed, no longer mine, flashed in my mind. Then other images. Wounded soldiers I'd treated, civilians caught in crossfire, the consequences of power wielded without compassion. I'd fix it, I said finally, my voice quiet but certain. I'd make it right. Captain Winters smiled for the first time since I'd entered his office. Then let's get to work. This is going to be complex, but you have the law on your side. And, he added, his smile turning grim, I've never lost a case defending a deployed soldier against civilian fraud. I left the JAG office with a plan forming in my mind. Marcus had taken everything from me while I was away serving my country. He'd erased me from my own life as if I'd never existed. But he'd made a critical mistake. He'd left a paper trail, and he'd underestimated me. As the sun set over the base, I checked into temporary housing, a small studio apartment that felt both foreign and familiar. Military efficiency, minimal comforts. I unpacked my few belongings and sat on the edge of the narrow bed, staring at the photo of Marcus and me that I'd shown Vanessa. We'd looked happy. I'd thought we were happy. I deleted the photo and opened my email instead. There, waiting in my inbox, was a message from Captain Winters with attachments. The initial legal filings against Marcus, forms for me to sign, and a preliminary financial. Helicis, at the bottom of his email was a single line. First step in taking back what's yours. I signed the documents immediately, scanned them and sent them back. Then I did something I'd been putting off. I called my mother. Rebecca? Her voice was thick with sleep. It was late in Arizona. Hi, Mom, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. I'm back stateside. Thank God, she breathed. Are you home? With Marcus? I closed my eyes, steadying myself. No, Mom. Marcus and there's been a problem. In the silence that followed, I could almost hear her sitting up in bed. Fully alert now. What happened? He sold our house while I was deployed. He's been living there with another woman. They're claiming to be married. My mother's gasp was followed by a string of curses that would have made my sergeant proud. That low-life, two-timing snake. In the grass. Where are you staying? Do you need money? I can wire you. Mom, I'm fine, I interrupted, smiling despite everything. I'm at the base. Jag is handling the legal side. I needed to tell someone from home. You come to Arizona, she insisted. Your old room is waiting. Take leave. Spend some time. I can't, I said gently. I need to stay here and fight this. Marcus took everything we had and invested it in a private prison. Can you believe that? A prison. My mother was quiet for a moment. Your father always said that man was too concerned with money, too eager to climb. My father, gone 5 years now. A retired Marine who'd never quite trusted my husband. Dad was right about a lot of things. What are you going to do, Becca? She asked softly, using my childhood nickname. I looked out the small window of my temporary housing at the darkened military base. Somewhere out there were soldiers like me, returning from war zones to pieces of their lives they'd left behind. Coming home should be the easy part, the safe part. I'm going to take back what's mine, I told her, and then I'm going to make something better out of it. After hanging up with my mother, I opened my laptop and began researching Hawthorne Correctional Facility. The more I read, the more my blood boiled. Understaffing, overcrowding, inadequate medical care, exploitative labor practices. Marcus hadn't just stolen from me. He'd invested in human suffering. As I scrolled through articles and reports, a plan began to crystallize in my mind. If Captain Winters was right, and I could gain control of Marcus's shares in the prison, I wouldn't just be reclaiming what was rightfully mine. I'd be positioned to change a broken system from the inside. My military training had taught me how to assess situations, identify weaknesses, and execute strategic operations. Now I would apply those skills to a different kind of battle. Marcus thought he had erased me, but he was about to discover just how permanent and formidable I really was. I closed my laptop and finally lay down on the narrow bed, exhausted but resolute. Tomorrow would be the first day of my new mission. The objective was clear: reclaim what was stolen from me and transform it into something that served justice rather than profit. As sleep finally claimed me, I held on to one certainty. Marcus had made the biggest mistake of his life when he betrayed a deployed soldier. He'd sold my house and invested in a prison. Soon enough, I would own them both. Coffee had become my lifeline over the past week. I nursed my third cup of the morning as I spread documents across the small table in my temporary housing unit, the Military Efficiency Apartment, becoming a makeshift command center for Operation Take Back My Life, as I'd started calling it in my head. Captain Winters had been true to his word. The initial legal filings had Marcus scrambling, according to the process server who'd delivered the papers. Never seen a man's face change color so fast, he'd told me with a hint of satisfaction. My phone buzzed with a text from Sergeant Maria Diaz, a friend from my medical unit who'd returned stateside 6 months before me. She'd offered her guest room, but I'd declined. This felt like a mission, and I needed the Spartan surroundings to keep me focused. Court date set yet? Her message: read. Preliminary hearing next Tuesday, I typed back. Discovery ongoing. Need backup? I smiled. Military friendship, direct, unwavering, and always ready to deploy. Not yet, but stay on alert. Setting my phone down, I returned to the financial records Captain Winters had subpoenaed. Marcus had been busy in my absence. Besides selling our house, he'd emptied our joint savings account, cashed in my portion of our investments, and even sold my car. All told, he'd liquidated nearly $600,000 of our shared assets, half of which was legally mine. But something wasn't adding up in the Hawthorne Correctional investment. According to Vanessa, they'd invested close to $1 million for a 51% controlling interest. Even in the murky world of private prison operations, that price seemed suspiciously low for majority ownership of a functioning correctional facility. I circled the figure in red and made a note to ask Captain Winters about it. My phone rang. Speak. Of the devil. Lieutenant Harlow, I answered. Lieutenant, it's Captain Winters. I've got news. Can you come to my office this afternoon? Yes, sir. 1400 hours? Perfect. And, Lieutenant, bring those financial documents we discussed. I think we've found something. The JAG office hummed with activity as paralegals and military attorneys moved efficiently between desks, carrying files and speaking in low, urgent tones. Captain Winters waved me into his office where a civilian in a crisp suit sat waiting. Lieutenant Harlow, this is Special Agent Claire Donovan with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. I shook her hand, noting her firm grip and assessing gaze. FBI? I wasn't expecting federal involvement. Agent Donovan nodded. Captain Winters contacted us after noticing some red flags in your husband's financial activities. What began as a domestic issue may actually intersect with an ongoing investigation. Hawthorne Correctional, I guessed, taking a seat. Yes, she confirmed. We've been monitoring several private correctional facilities for potential financial irregularities, labor violations, and civil rights concerns. Hawthorne is high on our list. Captain Winters leaned forward. Lieutenant, what your husband did, bigamy, fraud, theft of assets from a deployed soldier, those are serious enough, but it appears he may have inadvertently entangled himself in something much larger. Agent Donovan opened a laptop. Hawthorne Correctional is owned by Pinnacle Detention Systems. They operate 12 facilities across 5 states. On paper, they're profitable, well-run institutions. In reality, she turned the screen to show me a series of graphs and financial statements. They're a house of cards built on inflated occupancy, rates, falsified compliance reports, and kickbacks from service providers. And Marcus bought into this? I asked, stomach tightening. Not exactly, Captain Winters said. From what we can tell, he didn't buy shares in Pinnacle or even Hawthorne itself. He bought into a shell company called New Horizon Investments, which supposedly owns 51% of Hawthorne's operational contract. I frowned. Supposedly? Agent Donovan's expression tightened. We have reason to believe New Horizon was created specifically to launder money through Hawthorne while insulating the actual owners from liability. The implications hit me like a physical blow. So Marcus didn't just steal my money and invest it in a prison. He potentially invested it in a criminal enterprise? It appears that way, Captain Winters confirmed. The question is whether he knew what he was getting into. I thought about Marcus, his ambition, his impatience with my military career, his constant complaints about money. He would have researched it, I said slowly. Marcus never makes financial decisions without extensive research, but he also might overlook ethical concerns if the potential returns were high enough. Agent Donovan made a note. We'd like to interview him, but we need to be strategic. If he realizes he's under federal investigation, he might warn others involved in the scheme. What does this mean for my case? I asked Captain Winters. For reclaiming my assets? He exchanged a glance with Agent Donovan before answering. It complicates things, but potentially in your favor. If New Horizon is proven to be fraudulent, the court could order your investment returned as restitution, possibly with interest and damages. And if Marcus is implicated in knowingly participating in fraud? That would depend on his level of involvement, Agent Donovan answered. Best case scenario for him, he's an unwitting investor who loses his money. Worst case, he's an active participant in a conspiracy to commit wire fraud, money laundering, and potentially several other federal offenses. I sat back, processing this information. Part of me, the part still raw from betrayal, wouldn't mind seeing Marcus face federal charges, but another part remembered the man I'd married. How unlikely it seemed that he would knowingly entangle himself in something criminal. What do you need from me? I asked finally. For now, continue with your civil case as planned, Captain Winters advised. That gives us legal access to financial records without tipping our hand about the broader investigation. Agent Donovan nodded. And if you could avoid mentioning the FBI's involvement to anyone, especially your husband or his partner. Of course, I agreed. What about Vanessa? Is she implicated? At this point, she appears to be another victim, Agent Donovan said. But we'll know more as the investigation progresses. As I left the JAG office, my mind raced with this new information. Marcus hadn't just betrayed me personally, he'd potentially tied our finances to a criminal operation. The stakes had just gotten exponentially higher. The preliminary hearing was set for Tuesday, but on Sunday night my phone rang with an unknown number. Hello? Rebecca? It's Vanessa. I nearly hung up, but curiosity won out. How did you get this number? It was in Marcus's old contacts. I need to talk to you. Not over the phone. Can we meet? Every instinct told me to refuse, but something in her voice, urgency mixed with fear, gave me pause. Why should I meet with you? Because I found something in Marcus's office. Something about the prison investment. I think you need to see it. I hesitated, weighing the possibilities. This could be a trap or manipulation, but it could also be valuable information. There's a coffee shop on base, the Grounded Soldier. Civilians can access it with ID. Tomorrow, 0900. Thank you, she said, sounding genuinely relieved. I'll be there. I hung up without saying goodbye, then immediately called Captain Winters to inform him of the development. Be careful, Lieutenant, he warned. Extract whatever information she has, but reveal nothing about the federal investigation. Understood, sir. The next morning, I arrived at the Grounded Soldier 20 minutes early, selected a table with a clear view of both entrances, and positioned myself with my back to the wall, habits from deployment that hadn't yet faded. I ordered black coffee and waited, scanning each person who entered. Vanessa arrived precisely at 9, looking nothing like the confident woman who had greeted me from my porch just days earlier. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face bare of makeup, her designer clothes replaced with jeans and a plain sweater. She ordered tea before joining me, her hands visibly shaking as she set her cup down. "Thank you for meeting me," she began. "You said you found something," I replied, not interested in pleasantries. She reached into her purse and withdrew a flash drive. "After you left, after the legal papers came, Marcus started acting strange, paranoid. He's been shredding documents, making late-night phone calls. I heard him mention Hawthorne, so I went through his home office while he was out." She pushed the flash drive across the table. "I found this hidden in a false bottom drawer. There are financial records, emails, some kind of coded spreadsheet. I didn't understand most of it, but I saw enough to know something's very wrong with that prison investment." I eyed the flash drive without touching it. "Why are you giving this to me?" Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. "Because I'm scared, not just of losing the money or the house. I'm scared of what Marcus has gotten us into." She twisted the wedding ring she still wore. "When I copied these files, I also found something else. Legal documents, with my signature on them. Except I never signed them." "He forged your signature," I said, unsurprised. She nodded miserably. "On liability forms for New Horizon investments. Forms that say I acknowledge the inherent risks of the investment and waive all rights to legal recourse." A tear slipped down her cheek. "He set me up to take the fall if anything goes wrong. Something cold and calculating in Marcus's behavior was emerging, something I'd never seen during our marriage. Or had I simply been blind to it? "Why should I believe you?" I asked, still not touching the flash drive. "A week ago, you were living in my house, sleeping in my bed, claiming to be married to my husband." "I didn't know," she whispered. "I swear, I didn't know he was still married to you. I thought—" She trailed off, looking down at her tea. "It doesn't matter what I thought. I was wrong, stupid and wrong." I studied her face, looking for signs of deception. My years as a medical officer had taught me to read people in crisis, the subtle tells of lying versus genuine distress. Vanessa showed all the markers of someone genuinely terrified. "You realize that everything you've just told me incriminates Marcus," I said carefully. "He's still legally your partner, even if the marriage isn't valid." "I know," she replied, meeting my eyes directly for the first time. "But I need to protect myself now, and maybe—" She hesitated. "Maybe it's time someone held him accountable." I picked up the flash drive, turning it over in my palm. "Have you made copies?" "No. That's the only one. I was afraid to leave any digital trail he might find." I nodded slowly, making a decision. "I'll have this information reviewed by the appropriate people. In the meantime, you should be careful. If Marcus suspects you found anything—" "I know," she interrupted. "I've already packed a bag. I'm staying with my sister tonight." "Good." I slipped the flash drive into my pocket. "Vanessa, I need to ask you something else. Did Marcus ever mention who introduced him to the New Horizon investment? Any names of other investors or managers?" She frowned, thinking. "There was someone, a man named Sullivan, or Sutton. Marcus met with him several times before making the investment. Always very secretive about it. The name meant nothing to me, but I filed it away mentally to share with Agent Donovan. If you think of anything else, or if Marcus contacts you about the missing files, call me immediately." I wrote my number on a napkin and pushed it toward her. "I will," she promised, standing to leave. She hesitated, then added, "I'm sorry, Rebecca, for everything. If I had known—" "But you didn't," I finished for her. Now we both have to deal with the consequences of Marcus's choices. After Vanessa left, I remained at the table, my coffee growing cold as I contemplated this new development. I needed to get the flash drive to Agent Donovan immediately, but I also needed to be strategic. If the information it contained was as damning as Vanessa suggested, it could accelerate both my civil case and the federal investigation. I called Captain Winters as I walked back to my temporary housing. "Sir, I need to meet with you and Agent Donovan as soon as possible. I've received potentially significant evidence related to Hawthorne and New Horizon." "I'll arrange it," he promised. "In the meantime, Lieutenant, exercise extreme caution. If your husband is involved in something criminal and realizes you're closing in, there's no telling how he might react." His warning sent a chill through me. The Marcus I'd married had been ambitious and sometimes selfish, but never dangerous. Then again, the Marcus I'd married wouldn't have sold our house and committed bigamy while I was deployed. I found myself scanning the base perimeter as I walked, checking for unfamiliar vehicles or anyone who might be watching me. Another habit from deployment, but one that now seemed prudent rather than paranoid. Back in my quarters, I secured the flash drive in my locked military footlocker, then pulled out my laptop to prepare for the upcoming hearing. As I worked, a notification popped up, an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Hawthorne, read alone." My finger hovered over the mouse. This could be anything from a virus to a threat to valuable information. After a moment's hesitation, I clicked. The message was brief. "Lieutenant Harlow, your husband's investment has placed you in danger. Hawthorne is merely one piece of a larger operation. Evidence exists that could bring down the entire network, but those in control will eliminate threats without hesitation. Private Cooper died for asking questions. I don't want to be next. For your safety and mine, this communication never happened. A concerned guard." Attached was a single image, a grainy photograph of what appeared to be a ledger page with a list of names, including Reynolds M. Next to a substantial figure, followed by transfer complete, collateral secured. I stared at the screen, a cold weight settling in my stomach. Who was Private Cooper? What had he discovered? And what had it cost him? The mission had just become more complex and potentially more dangerous than I'd anticipated. This wasn't just about reclaiming stolen assets anymore. Something systemic and sinister was happening at Hawthorne Correctional, something people were willing to kill to protect. And somehow, my husband was involved. I forwarded the email to Captain Winters with a short note. "Sir, received this just now. Unknown sender. Requires immediate discussion." Within minutes, my phone rang. "Don't respond to that email," Captain Winters instructed without preamble. "Don't reply. Don't acknowledge receipt. I'm bringing Agent Donovan into this immediately. We need to move up the timeline on this investigation." "Sir, who is Private Cooper?" A heavy pause. "Former military police, worked as a guard at Hawthorne. After discharge. Found dead in his apartment 3 months ago. Ruled a suicide, but there were inconsistencies in the investigation. The implications were clear. Whatever Marcus had invested in was deadly serious. What's our next move, sir?" "We accelerate everything," he replied grimly. "The hearing tomorrow, the investigation, all of it." "And, Lieutenant?" "Until we know exactly what we're dealing with, you might want to consider accepting Sergeant Diaz's offer of accommodations, somewhere less predictable than base housing." After hanging up, I packed my essential belongings into my duffel bag and texted Maria. My temporary military housing suddenly felt exposed, too easy to find. As I waited for her response, I found myself thinking of my time in the combat zone, the constant vigilance, the awareness that danger could come from any direction at any moment. I'd returned home expecting peace, expecting to feel safe. Instead, I was preparing for another kind of battle, one with invisible enemies, unclear objectives, and my husband at the center of it all. My phone buzzed with Maria's reply. Doors. Open. Spare key under blue pot. Gun in nightstand if needed. I shouldered my bag and took one last look around the sparse military apartment. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain. I would not be intimidated, and I would not back down. Marcus had stolen my home and invested in corruption. Now it seemed people might be willing to kill to protect that investment. I'd faced worse odds in the field. Locking the door behind me, I stepped into the gathering darkness, moving with purpose toward a safe haven and the next phase of an operation that had become far more dangerous than I'd anticipated. Maria's apartment was a third-floor walk-up in an aging brick building 10 miles from base. The neighborhood was a mix of retired military and working-class families, unassuming, overlooked, perfect for lying low. I'd arrived after midnight, using Maria's spare key to let myself in while she worked the night shift at the VA hospital. Sleep had been elusive, my mind racing with questions about the mysterious email, Private Cooper's death, and Marcus's connection to whatever was happening at Hawthorne. I'd spent hours reviewing the files from Vanessa's flash drive, finding a labyrinth of shell companies, suspicious wire transfers, and cryptic communications that pointed to something far more insidious than prison mismanagement. By dawn, I'd showered, put on my Class A uniform, and was nursing my second cup of coffee when Maria returned home, still in her scrubs. "You look like hell," she greeted me, dropping her bag by the door. "Thanks. You always know what to say." She smiled tiredly. "Court today?" I nodded. "Preliminary hearing, just to establish jurisdiction and legal standing." "Want backup?" she asked, echoing her text from days earlier. This time I accepted. "Yes, but stay inconspicuous. There's more happening than I initially thought." Maria raised an eyebrow but didn't press for details. That was the beauty of military friendship. She trusted that I'd tell her what she needed to know, when she needed to know it. "I'll change and grab my sidearm," she said simply. An hour later, we were in Maria's nondescript Subaru, driving toward the county courthouse. I'd briefed Captain Winters about the contents of Vanessa's flash drive, and he'd arranged for Agent Donovan to attend the hearing incognito. "Remember," he'd instructed during our morning call, "today is solely about establishing your legal claim to the assets. No mention of Hawthorne's potentially criminal operations or the federal investigation." "Understood, sir." The courthouse steps were crowded with the usual weekday traffic of lawyers, clients, and courthouse employees. Maria dropped me at the entrance, then circled to find parking, her eyes constantly scanning our surroundings. Inside, I located the assigned courtroom and spotted Marcus immediately, huddled with an attorney near the front. He wore an expensive suit I'd never seen before, his hair freshly cut, his posture rigid. Seeing him in person, the man I'd loved, the man who'd betrayed me, sent a jolt through my system that I carefully suppressed. This wasn't the time for emotion. Captain Winters was already seated at the plaintiff's table, organizing documents. He nodded as I approached, his expression professional but reassuring. "Lieutenant," he greeted me. "Ready?" "Yes, sir." I took my seat beside him, keeping my eyes forward, refusing to acknowledge Marcus despite feeling his gaze on me. From the corner of my eye, I noticed Agent Donovan seated at the back of the courtroom, dressed in civilian business attire, indistinguishable from any other observer. The bailiff called the court to order, and Judge Eleanor Harmon entered, a stern-looking woman in her 60s with silver hair and penetrating eyes. After the formalities, she addressed the attorneys. "This is a preliminary hearing in the matter of Harlow v. Reynolds. I've reviewed the initial filings. Captain Winters, please state your client's claims succinctly." Captain Winters stood. "Your Honor, Lieutenant Rebecca Harlow, an active-duty military officer, returned from overseas deployment to discover that her husband, Marcus Reynolds, had illegally sold their jointly owned home, emptied their joint accounts, and fraudulently represented himself as divorced in order to enter into a bigamous marriage with another woman. Additionally, he invested substantial sums from their joint assets without Lieutenant Harlow's knowledge or consent, violating both state law and the Service Members Civil Relief Act, which provides special protections to deployed military personnel. Judge Harmon turned to Marcus's attorney. Mr. Grayson, your response? A slick-looking man in his 40s stood. Your Honor, my client acknowledges selling the marital property and reallocating joint assets, but contends this was done with the implied consent of Lieutenant Harlow, who has been largely absent from the marriage for years due to multiple voluntary deployments. Furthermore, Mr. Reynolds believed the marriage to be effectively dissolved based on verbal agreements between the parties prior to Lieutenant Harlow's latest deployment. Objection, Captain Winters interjected. There is no legal concept of effectively dissolved in our marriage statutes. A marriage is either legally terminated through proper divorce proceedings or it remains valid. Sustained, Judge Harmon said sharply. She fixed Marcus with a penetrating stare. Mr. Reynolds, are you claiming that you and Lieutenant Harlow were legally divorced at the time you sold the marital home and entered into a marriage ceremony with another woman? Marcus shifted uncomfortably as his attorney leaned in to whisper something. No, Your Honor, he finally answered. But I believed. Your beliefs are irrelevant to the legal status of your marriage. Judge Harmon cut him off. Did Lieutenant Harlow sign divorce papers? Did this court or any other court issue a divorce decree? No, Your Honor, Marcus admitted. Judge Harmon made a note. Then, regardless of what you believed, you remained legally married to Lieutenant Harlow while she was deployed serving this country? She turned back to Captain Winters. What specific relief is your client seeking at this time? We are requesting an immediate freeze on all assets acquired with marital funds, including the property at 1478 Lakeside Avenue and any investments made with funds from joint accounts. We're also seeking full financial disclosure, a restraining order preventing further alienation of marital assets, and temporary support for Lieutenant Harlow while the case proceeds. Judge Harmon nodded. Mr. Grayson, any objection to these preliminary measures? Marcus's attorney cleared his throat. We object to the freezing of the investment in New Horizon, Your Honor. That investment represents significant future income potential that would benefit both parties in any eventual settlement. Captain Winters replied smoothly, Your Honor, that's precisely why the investment should be frozen, to preserve its value for equitable distribution once the full extent of marital assets is determined. Judge Harmon considered for a moment. I'm inclined to grant the freeze on all assets pending full financial discovery. Mr. Reynolds has demonstrated a concerning pattern of disposing of marital property without proper authorization. She looked directly at Marcus. This court takes a dim view of attempts to divest deployed service members of their property rights while they're serving our country. She turned back to Captain Winters. Regarding the property at Lakeside Avenue, what is Lieutenant Harlow's position on the current occupants? Captain Winters looked to me, and I nodded slightly. We'd discussed this strategy. Your Honor, Lieutenant Harlow does not seek to immediately evict the current occupants, recognizing the hardship that would cause. However, she does seek recognition of her ownership interest in the property and appropriate compensation for its use. Judge Harmon nodded approvingly. Reasonable and measured. She made more notes before continuing. I'm granting the plaintiff's requests for asset freeze, financial disclosure, and restraining order. Mr. Reynolds will provide complete financial records within 7 days, including all documentation related to the New Horizon investment. The property at Lakeside Avenue will remain occupied as currently arranged until final disposition, but Mr. Reynolds will pay reasonable rental value into an escrow account. She fixed Marcus with a stern look. And let me be perfectly clear. Mr. Reynolds, any attempt to dispose of, hide, or otherwise manipulate marital assets while this case proceeds will result in contempt charges. Am I understood? Yes, Your Honor, Marcus replied, his face flushed with anger or embarrassment. Perhaps both. One more thing, Judge Harmon added. The court takes particular interest in the protection of service members' rights under the SCRA. Captain Winters, please prepare a detailed accounting of all actions taken by Mr. Reynolds that potentially violated Lieutenant Harlow's protections under that act. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Harmon brought down her gavel. We'll reconvene in 3 weeks to review financial disclosures and determine next steps. Court is adjourned. As people began to rise, I caught a flash of movement at the back of the courtroom, a man slipping out the door, moving with purpose. Something about his bearing triggered my combat-honed instincts. I turned to find Agent Donovan already on her feet, eyes tracking the same figure. I gathered my things quickly, thanking Captain Winters for his representation. As we moved toward the exit, Marcus intercepted us, his attorney hovering anxiously. At his shoulder, "Rebecca," he said, his voice low and urgent. "We need to talk. Privately. All communication should go through counsel," Captain Winters interjected smoothly. Marcus's eyes never left mine. "You don't understand what you're getting into with this New Horizon thing. It's not what you think." "I think it's exactly what it appears to be," I replied coldly. "A fraudulent attempt to hide marital assets." "It's more complicated than that," he insisted, a note of genuine fear creeping into his voice. "There are people involved who—" "Mr. Reynolds," his attorney cut in, placing a restraining hand on his arm. "Not here." Marcus shrugged off the hand. "Rebecca, listen to me. If you push too hard on this, things could get dangerous, for both of us." I studied him, trying to read between the lines. Was this a threat or a warning? "Are you saying you knowingly invested our money in something illegal, Marcus?" His face paled. "No. I'm saying I didn't realize— Look, just drop the investment part of the claim. Take the house, take the savings, but leave New Horizon alone." "So you can keep profiting from whatever's happening at Hawthorne?" I asked quietly. "Not a chance." "You don't understand," he hissed, leaning closer. "They told me it was just a routine investment in prison operations, guaranteed returns from government contracts. I didn't know about the other stuff until later." "What other stuff, Marcus?" I pressed. His attorney physically inserted himself between us. "This conversation is over. Mr. Reynolds, come with me now." As they walked away, Captain Winters leaned in. That was illuminating. He's scared. Not of me, I observed. Of whoever's really behind New Horizon. Outside the courthouse, I scanned the area for Maria, finally spotting her Subaru idling half a block away. As I started toward it, Agent Donovan appeared at my side. "Don't react," she said quietly, matching my pace. "The man who left during proceedings, we've identified him as Gregory Sutton, CFO of Pinnacle Detention Systems. He shouldn't have known about this hearing." The name clicked immediately. Sutton. Vanessa mentioned that name. Marcus met with him before investing. "He's under investigation in 3 states for various financial crimes," Agent Donovan continued. "His presence here suggests New Horizon is more significant to Pinnacle than we initially thought." We reached Maria's car. Agent Donovan handed me what looked like a business card but contained only a phone number. "Call this secure line if Marcus contacts you again. His reaction in there confirms he's aware of illegal activity. We need to accelerate our timeline." I nodded, pocketing the card as Maria leaned across to open the passenger door. Agent Donovan melted back into the courthouse crowd as I climbed in. "Well?" Maria asked, pulling away from the curb. "It went as expected," I replied, scanning the rearview mirror. "But we might have company. Black sedan, 3 cars back." Maria checked her mirror casually. "I see it. Hang on." She made a series of unexpected turns, confirming my suspicion as the sedan stayed with us. "Friend of your ex?" she asked, her voice light but her eyes serious. "Probably a friend of his business partner's," I replied. "Take the next right then. An immediate left. There's a VA police checkpoint ahead." Maria executed the maneuver perfectly. The black sedan hesitated at the turn, then abruptly continued straight as the VA hospital entrance came into view, complete with security guards and cameras. "Amateur," Maria muttered. "If you're going to tail someone, commit to it." We circled the VA complex twice before heading back toward her apartment by a different route, ensuring we weren't followed. Inside, I changed out of my uniform and checked my secure email. Captain Winters had already forwarded Judge Harmon's orders, along with a note. "Initial victory, but be vigilant. Agent D reports Sutton's presence concerning, suggests direct interest from Pinnacle's top tier." I was mulling this over when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Need to talk. Not safe at home. Marcus acting strange. Same coffee shop?" V. Vanessa again. I hesitated, then replied, "Not there. Too exposed. Text this number for instructions." I gave her Maria's number, not wanting any more direct contact on my phone. Maria raised an eyebrow when I explained. "You trust her?" "No," I admitted. "But she has information we need, and I think she's genuinely afraid." "I'll set up a meet," Maria decided. "Off base, public, but not too public. And I'll hang back, keep watch." 20 minutes later, we had arranged for Vanessa to meet us at a busy shopping center food court in 2 hours. I spent the intervening time reviewing more documents from the flash drive, focusing on communications between Marcus and someone identified only as GS. Gregory Sutton, almost certainly. One exchange in particular caught my attention. GS. Need confirmation that the liability framework is in place. All investors must have proper documentation. Marcus. My wife's signature will be difficult to obtain while she's deployed. GS. Find a suitable alternative signatory. Someone who can assume risk if necessary. This is non-negotiable. Marcus. Understood. I have a candidate in mind. Vanessa. He had set her up from the beginning, planning to use her as a scapegoat, if the investment went south. The cold calculation of it was breathtaking. My phone buzzed with a call from Captain Winters. "Lieutenant, we've made a breakthrough. The financial records you provided contained account numbers that match transactions flagged in an ongoing DEA investigation. New Horizon appears to be laundering money from narcotics trafficking through Hawthorne's commissary system." I sat up straighter. "Drug money?" "Yes, but with a twist. The drugs aren't coming in from outside. They're prescription medications being diverted from the prison's medical supplies, marked as administered to inmates, but actually being routed back into street distribution networks. And the profits flow through New Horizon." I finished, the picture becoming clearer. "Exactly. The 51% ownership gives them control of Hawthorne's medical contracts and commissary operations, perfect cover for both ends of the scheme." "Does Marcus know about this aspect?" Captain Winters sighed. "That's the million-dollar question. Given his financial background, it's hard to believe he wouldn't recognize the signs of money laundering. But proving knowledge versus willful blindness is always challenging." After hanging up, I briefed Maria on this new development as we drove to meet Vanessa. "So your ex might be a drug trafficker on top of everything else," she summarized. "Charming guy. I'm still struggling to reconcile the Marcus I married with someone who would get involved in this," I admitted. Maria gave me a sideways glance. "People change, Becca, especially when money's involved." The shopping center was busy with afternoon shoppers. We spotted Vanessa immediately, sitting alone at a corner table in the food court, a half-eaten salad in front of her, her eyes constantly scanning the area. She looked even worse than at our last meeting, thinner, with dark circles under her eyes, her hands visibly trembling as she raised a water bottle to her lips. Maria continued past her, taking up position at a table with clear sightlines to both Vanessa and the main entrances. I approached alone, sliding into the seat across from Vanessa. "Thank you for coming," she said immediately. I didn't know who else to turn to. "What happened?" I asked, keeping my voice low. She glanced around, nervously before leaning forward, Marcus found out I took the files. He went crazy, tearing the house apart, screaming about how I'd ruined everything. Then he got a call and just changed. Became completely calm. Told me everything was fine, that he'd handle it. A chill ran through me. When was this? Last night? I pretended to believe him, waited until he fell asleep, then packed a bag and left. I've been driving around all day, afraid to go anywhere he might look for me. She pushed her salad away. This morning, someone broke into my sister's apartment, the place I was supposed to be staying. They ransacked it, but didn't take anything valuable. Just went through all the papers. Looking for the files you took, I concluded. She nodded miserably. What have we gotten into, Rebecca? What is this prison thing really about? I weighed how much to tell her, deciding partial truth was safest. It appears New Horizon is involved in financial improprieties at Hawthorne, possibly serious criminal activity. Vanessa closed her eyes briefly. I knew it. I could tell something was off when Marcus started bringing in so much cash. He said it was investor distributions, but it was always in these thick envelopes already counted out. She opened her eyes, fear evident in them. Is that why that man was following me yesterday? And again today? My alertness spiked. Someone's following you? Right now? I don't know if he's here, but there was a man in a dark suit watching my sister's building this morning. Then I spotted him again at the gas station when I stopped to fill up. Her voice quavered. I thought I was being paranoid until I saw him circle this parking lot twice before I came inside. I caught Maria's eye across the food court, making a subtle motion to indicate a potential threat. She nodded almost imperceptibly and stood, moving casually toward the nearest exit to scan the parking area. Vanessa, listen carefully, I said, keeping my voice steady. You need to go somewhere Marcus and his associates can't find you. Do you have friends or family out of state? My cousin in Arizona, she said after a moment's thought. Marcus doesn't know her. Good. Don't book a flight online or use credit cards. Get cash, buy a bus ticket, and stay off social media completely. I pulled a prepaid phone from my pocket, one of 3 I'd purchased that morning. Use this for emergencies only. I've programmed 2 numbers in it, mine and a federal agent who can help if you're in immediate danger. Her eyes widened at the mention of federal agents, but she took the phone with shaking hands. I'll leave tonight. My own phone vibrated, with a text from Maria. Black sedan in North Lot, same as courthouse. 2 men watching entrances. I kept my expression neutral. We need to leave separately. There's a service corridor behind the food vendor to your right. It leads to the loading docks. My friend will meet you there in 5 minutes and make sure you get to your car safely. Vanessa. Nodded, her face pale but determined. Rebecca, I'm sorry. For everything with Marcus. I truly didn't know. I believe you, I said, surprised to realize I meant it. Now go, stay safe. As she walked away, I sent Maria the new plan, then took a circuitous route through the shopping center, emerging at a side entrance where fewer people were coming and going. I spotted the black sedan immediately and the man standing beside it, casually smoking a cigarette while watching the main doors. I recognized him from the courthouse, one of Sutton's people. They weren't just following me, they were hunting us both. Me for the legal threat I posed, Vanessa for the evidence she'd taken. And based on what happened to Private Cooper, they wouldn't hesitate to eliminate threats permanently. This had escalated from a legal battle to recover stolen assets into something far more dangerous. I was now in direct conflict with a criminal organization that had infiltrated a private prison system, using my husband as either a willing accomplice or an unwitting pawn. As I ducked behind a delivery truck to avoid being spotted, I made a decision. It was time to stop playing defense. If I wanted to reclaim what was mine and expose whatever was happening at Hawthorne, I needed to take the fight directly to them, starting with a visit to the prison itself. This is insane, Maria said, checking the forged visitor badge I'd created. You do realize you're potentially committing multiple felonies? Only if I get caught, I replied, adjusting the conservative pantsuit I'd purchased specifically for this mission. I looked every inch the unremarkable government compliance inspector I was pretending to be. We were parked in a roadside diner 2 miles from Hawthorne Correctional Facility, going over the final details of my improvised operation. After discovering we were being followed, I'd spent 3 days meticulously planning while Captain Winters and Agent Donovan built their official case. But official investigations move slowly, and Marcus's frightened behavior at the courthouse suggested we might not have that kind of time. If evidence was being destroyed or people silenced, I needed to see Hawthorne for myself, immediately. The minute they run that badge through their system, you're done, Maria warned. They won't, I assured her. I researched their protocols. For routine state compliance inspections, they just visually check credentials at the gate. The full verification only happens for federal inspectors or law enforcement. And if you're wrong? I patted the prepaid phone in my pocket. Then I call Captain Winters and he sends in the cavalry with an actual warrant. I checked my watch. The shift change happens at 2 p.m. That's my window. Maria sighed, resigned to my stubborn determination. If you're not out by 5 p.m., I'm calling in the military police and the FBI. Official operation be damned. Deal. I gathered my props, a leather portfolio, clipboard, and government-issue pen I'd borrowed from the JAG office. How do I look? Like a bureaucrat with a death wish, Maria muttered. Just be careful in there, Becca. These people made a guard commit suicide for asking questions. What do you think they'll do to an imposter? I'll be fine, I promised, though the gravity of the risk wasn't lost on me. My cover is solid: state compliance review, routine inspection of medical dispensary procedures. I'm in and out in 3 hours, with photographic evidence of whatever they're doing with the prescription medications. Maria nodded reluctantly. I'll be monitoring the main frequency. She handed me a small earpiece disguised as a hearing aid. Emergency channel is pre-programmed if you need immediate extraction. With a final check of my disguise and documents, I got into the nondescript government surplus sedan we'd borrowed from a friend at the VA hospital. The drive to Hawthorne took precisely 8 minutes, past rolling farmland that grew increasingly sparse as I approached the facility's perimeter. Hawthorne Correctional rose from the landscape like a brutalist monument to human containment, concrete and steel, surrounded by 2 layers of razor wire fencing. As I approached the main gate, I reminded myself to breathe normally. I'd treated wounded soldiers under active fire. I could certainly handle pretending to be a state inspector. The guard at the checkpoint looked bored as I pulled up. I rolled down my window and offered my most bureaucratically efficient smile along with my forged credentials. Angela Weber, State Compliance Division, I said crisply. I'm here for the quarterly medical dispensary review. He barely glanced at my badge. You're not on the schedule. I feigned mild irritation. That's because your administration never responds to our scheduling requests. After 3 unanswered emails, the division director authorized an unannounced inspection. I gave him a look that suggested this was a routine annoyance. You can call your administrator if you'd like, but I should warn you that delaying a mandated compliance review can trigger an automatic citation. The guard sighed with the universal weariness of low-level employees dealing with red tape. New procedure says I have to log all visitors in the system. My heart rate spiked, but I kept my expression neutral. Of course, though I should note that the inspection timer starts now, not when I actually reach the medical unit. Last quarter, Facility 38 tried the same delay tactic and ended up with 7 compliance violations because time ran out. He hesitated, clearly weighing the hassle of processing me against the hassle he'd face from his superiors if I reported delays. Finally, he waved me through, making a cursory note in a logbook rather than entering anything into the computer system. Administration building is straight ahead. Check in at the front desk and they'll escort you to medical. Thank you, I replied, driving through as calmly as if I belonged there. The administration building was newer than the main prison blocks, with glass doors and modern furnishings that created an illusion of transparency and rehabilitation that I suspected was purely for show. At the reception desk, I repeated my cover story to a young woman who seemed equally unconcerned with verification. "Medical inspections again?" She sighed. "That's the third one this month." This caught my attention. "Really? From our division?" "No, some federal people last week. And someone from the insurance company before that." She reached for a phone. "I'll call Dr. Patel to escort you." "Actually," I interjected smoothly, "the review requires me to observe standard escort procedures. If you could assign a regular security officer, that would help me complete my compliance checklist." She shrugged and redirected her call. Minutes later, a uniformed guard arrived to accompany me to the medical wing. Officer Wilson was a heavy-set man in his 50s with the weary demeanor of someone who had seen too much and cared too little. As we walked through the facility, I made a show of checking items off on my clipboard while discreetly studying the layout, security measures, and staff interactions. "Been here long, Officer Wilson?" I asked conversationally. 15 years, he replied without enthusiasm. "Longer than most." "You must have seen a lot of changes." He grunted non-committally. "Some things change, most don't." "I imagine the new management brought some adjustments," I probed. "Since Pinnacle took over the operational contract." His pace faltered almost imperceptibly. "I suppose." "I'm particularly interested in the medical inventory systems," I continued. "There have been concerns at other facilities about medication tracking." Wilson's face remained impassive, but I noticed his hand tighten slightly on his belt. "You'd have to ask Dr. Patel about that. I just handle security." We reached the medical wing, a surprisingly modern facility given the age of the main prison. Glass partitions separated examination rooms from a central nurses' station, with a locked dispensary at the far end. A middle-aged woman in a lab coat approached, her expression professionally neutral. "Dr. Patel," Officer Wilson introduced us. "This is Ms. Weber from State Compliance, here for a medical review." Dr. Patel's eyes narrowed slightly. "We weren't notified of an inspection. Unannounced visits are part of our new protocol," I explained smoothly. "I'll try to be as unobtrusive as possible." "I'll need to see your authorization paperwork," she insisted, more thorough than the gate guard had been. I presented my forged documents, maintaining an air of routine boredom. "Standard quarterly review. I'll need access to your dispensary records for the past 3 months, medication inventory logs, and administration documentation." She examined my paperwork carefully before reluctantly nodding. "Follow me. Officer Wilson, you can return to your post." "Actually," I said quickly, "protocol requires continuous security presence during controlled substance inventory reviews." Dr. Patel and Officer Wilson exchanged a brief glance that set my internal alarms ringing. Something wasn't right. "Of course, Dr. Patel finally agreed. "This way." She led us to a small office adjacent to the dispensary and logged into a computer. "What specific records are you looking for?" "Let's start with Class 2 narcotics," I suggested, naming the category that included most commonly diverted pain medications. "Oxycodone, fentanyl, morphine, the usual audit targets." Dr. Patel pulled up a spreadsheet that appeared meticulously maintained, perhaps too perfect. "As you can see, all dispensations are logged with patient ID, dosage, date and time, and authorizing physician. We've had 0 discrepancies in our counts for the past 18 months. "Impressive," I remarked, scanning the data. "Most facilities show at least some counting errors or documentation issues. Mind if I see the actual inventory?" A flicker of tension crossed her face. "The dispensary is secured. I'll need to request a second authorization for visitor access. Or I can observe through the window while you conduct the count," I suggested. "That should satisfy protocol." Before she could respond, the office phone rang. Dr. Patel answered, listening briefly before her expression changed. "Yes, sir. Right. Away." She hung up and turned to me with forced pleasantness. "The administrator would like to meet you. Apparently there's some confusion about today's inspection." My pulse quickened, but I maintained my bureaucratic facade. "Of course, though I should continue my review while the schedule permits." "The administrator was quite insistent," she replied, her tone making it clear this wasn't a request. "Officer, Wilson will escort you to his office." As we walked away from the medical wing, I mentally recalculated my options. My cover was likely compromised, but I hadn't seen enough yet to justify an emergency extraction. The administrator's office might actually provide access to higher-level information if I could maintain the charade a bit longer. "Is the administrator new?" I asked Wilson casually. "I don't recall meeting him during previous inspections." "Mr. Sutton has been overseeing operations for about 6 months," Wilson replied, confirming my suspicions. Gregory Sutton wasn't just CFO of Pinnacle. He was directly managing Hawthorne's operations. We reached a well-appointed office suite where a secretary nodded us straight through to an inner door. Wilson knocked once, then opened it without waiting for a response. The man behind the desk was immediately recognizable from the courthouse. Gregory Sutton, late 50s, silver-haired, with the polished appearance of a corporate executive rather than a prison administrator. He smiled as I entered, a cold expression that never reached his eyes. "Ms. Weber, please come in. Officer Wilson, that will be all." As Wilson departed, closing the door behind him, Sutton gestured to a chair across from his desk. I sat, maintaining my composure despite the dangerous turn this infiltration had taken. "State Compliance Division," Sutton mused, studying a copy of my forged credentials. "Funny thing, I had my secretary call the division while you were in medical. They have no record of an Angela Weber, nor any scheduled or unscheduled inspections at our facility today." I raised an eyebrow, projecting calm indignation. "There must be some mistake. I've been with the division for 3 years. Perhaps you spoke with someone in the wrong department?" "Perhaps," he conceded, though his expression showed he wasn't fooled. "Though I find it curious that your inspection specifically targeted our medication inventory, the same area the DEA was so interested in last week." He leaned forward. "Who are you really working for, Ms. Weber? Or should I call you Lieutenant Harlow?" The direct use of my name sent a chill through me, but I refused to show it. There was no point maintaining the charade. "You seem to have me at a disadvantage, Mr. Sutton." He smiled thinly. "You're not as subtle as you think. After our courthouse encounter, I had you thoroughly investigated. Decorated military officer recently returned from deployment, married to one of our investors." He gestured dismissively. "The rest was simple deduction. Though I must admit, entering a secured facility under false pretenses shows impressive initiative. Almost as impressive as running a drug diversion scheme through a prison medical system," I countered, abandoning pretense entirely. Sutton laughed, seemingly genuinely amused. "Is that what you think is happening here?" "Isn't it? Prescription medications logged as administered to inmates but actually being redirected back into street distribution. New Horizon providing the financial laundering mechanism for the profits." "A fascinating theory," he replied. "Completely unprovable, of course, but creative." He stood and walked to a window overlooking the prison yard. "Your husband never mentioned how resourceful you were. A oversight on his part, perhaps." "Marcus doesn't know me as well as he thinks," I said evenly, just as I suspect he didn't fully understand what he was investing in with New Horizon. Sutton turned back to me, his expression calculating. Marcus knew exactly what he was investing in. A highly profitable private corrections management system with certain operational efficiencies. "Is that what you call it?" I asked. "Seems more like systematic exploitation and criminal conspiracy." "Lieutenant Harlow," Sutton sighed, returning to his seat. "The corrections industry operates in gray areas by necessity. We provide a service neither the government nor the public wants to examine too closely. In return, we maintain profitability for our investors." He spread his hands. "Your husband understood this dynamic perfectly. And Vanessa? Did she understand when Marcus forged her signature to make her the liability shield?" A flicker of genuine surprise crossed Sutton's face. "Ah, so that's how you came by certain information. The girlfriend has been sharing stories." He shook his head. "Marcus assured me she was fully aware of her role." "Marcus lied," I stated flatly. "Just like he lied about our divorce, about selling our house, about everything." Sutton studied me for a moment, then made a decision. "Lieutenant Harlow, we seem to have reached an impasse. You've committed several felonies by entering this facility under false pretenses. I've been implicated in activities that, while perhaps ethically questionable, would be extremely difficult to prove in court. What's your point?" "My point," he said with exaggerated patience, "is that we might find a mutually beneficial resolution that doesn't involve criminal charges or prolonged legal battles." "I'm listening." "Your interest seems primarily financial. Recovering your investment in the house, the savings accounts, possibly some damages for emotional distress." He named a figure that would have been impressive had I not already known: the full extent of Marcus's theft. "In exchange, you sign confidentiality agreements regarding any information you think you've discovered about our operations, and transfer any interest you might claim in New Horizon to Pinnacle directly." I pretended to consider the offer. "And what about Marcus?" "Your husband has become a liability," Sutton admitted. "His personal complications have created unnecessary exposure for our enterprise. Rest assured, his involvement with Pinnacle and New Horizon will be terminated." The coldness with which he discussed ending Marcus's role made me wonder if "terminated" carried a double meaning. Despite everything, I felt a flicker of concern for the man I had once loved. "I'll need time to consider your offer," I said carefully, "and to consult with my attorney." "Of course," Sutton agreed smoothly, "though I should mention that our patience is not unlimited. Certain parties have invested significant resources in this operation, and they take threats to their interests very seriously." The threat was unmistakable, but I met his gaze steadily. "I understand perfectly, Mr. Sutton." He reached for his phone. "Officer Wilson will escort you out. I expect your decision within 48 hours. He smiled without warmth. "Do give careful thought to your options, Lieutenant Harlow. Some choices can't be undone." As Wilson led me back through the facility toward the exit, I maintained an outward calm while my mind raced. The operation hadn't gone as planned, but I'd confirmed the connection between New Horizon, Pinnacle, and whatever was happening in Hawthorne's medical system. More importantly, I'd established direct contact with Sutton himself, and now he knew I was a threat. At the main gate, Wilson returned my visitor badge and offered an unexpected comment. "Private Cooper was a friend of mine," he said quietly, not meeting my eyes. "Whatever you're looking for, be careful." Before I could respond, he turned and walked back toward the administration building, leaving me to ponder his warning as I drove away from Hawthorne. Maria was waiting anxiously at our rendezvous point, her relief evident as I pulled in. "Jesus. Becca, you cut it close. What happened in there?" My cover was blown, I admitted, sliding into the passenger seat of her car. Sutton himself confronted me. He knows everything, who I am, my connection to Marcus, all of it. "We need to call Winters immediately," Maria insisted, already reaching for her phone. "Not yet," I countered, stopping her hand. "Sutton made me an offer. Financial settlement in exchange for my silence and relinquishing any claim to New Horizon." Maria's eyes widened. "You're not actually considering it?" "No," I assured her. "But I told him I needed time to decide. That gives us a window. To act before they realize I'm not playing ball." "Act how?" Maria asked suspiciously. I pulled out my phone and opened the camera roll, showing her the photos I'd managed to take in the medical wing before being summoned to Sutton's office. "I got partial scans of their medication logs. Look at the patient. IDs, they're sequential and identical in pattern. Those aren't real inmates. Maria studied the images. Ghost patients for ghost medications. Exactly. Combined with Wilson's comment about Private Cooper, it confirms our suspicions about medication diversion. I scrolled to another image. And I caught this when we passed the administrative offices. The photo showed a whiteboard visible through a partially open door, displaying a flowchart labeled NH Distribution Network, with various locations and figures. New Horizon isn't just an investment vehicle, I explained. It's the actual distribution network for whatever they're siphoning from the prison's medical supplies. And based on what Sutton said, it goes beyond Hawthorne. It's likely happening across multiple Pinnacle facilities. This is way bigger than recovering your stolen assets, Maria observed. It always was, I agreed. But now I have leverage and a plan. As we drove away from Hawthorne, I outlined my strategy. Rather than just reclaiming what Marcus had stolen, I was now positioned to take control of the entire operation, not to continue it, but to dismantle it from within, while ensuring justice for those involved. Sutton had unwittingly revealed the pathway forward. All I needed to do was convince Marcus to transfer his New Horizon shares directly to me instead of back to Pinnacle, then use my status as controlling shareholder to access the evidence needed to bring down the entire operation. The sun was setting, behind us, casting long shadows across the landscape as we headed back to base. The stakes had escalated far beyond a betrayed wife seeking justice. I was now engaged in a dangerous game against a sophisticated criminal enterprise, one that had already demonstrated its willingness to eliminate threats, but they had made a critical mistake in underestimating me. They saw a wronged military spouse, not a tactical officer with combat experience and institutional backing. That misconception would be their downfall. As Maria drove, I texted Captain Winters a brief coded update, then called the secure number Agent Donovan had provided. The next phase would require perfect coordination between military justice, federal investigators, and my own careful maneuvering. "Where to now?" Maria asked as we approached the highway junction. I checked my watch, calculating the timing. Lakeside Avenue. It's time to pay Marcus a visit. Night was falling as we approached my former home, the place that had once represented everything I'd worked for. Now it was simply one more piece in a complex strategy, a strategy that would ultimately give me ownership of not just my stolen assets, but the very prison operation that Marcus and his criminal partners had created. The irony wasn't lost on me. Marcus had taken my home while I was deployed serving my country. Soon, I would own the prison system he had invested in, and he might very well find himself inside it. Lakeside Avenue was quiet as we approached, most homes dark except for porch lights and the occasional blue flicker of television screens. My former house stood out, every light blazing, Marcus's car in the driveway alongside an unfamiliar black SUV with government plates. "That's not good," Maria muttered, slowing as we passed. "Looks like Pinnacle sent reinforcements." I studied the scene carefully. Or Sutton's warning me, making sure I understand what I'm up against. I checked my phone. No messages from Captain Winters or Agent Donovan. "Circle back. Drop me at the corner and wait 2 blocks down. If I'm not out in 30 minutes, call Winters directly." Maria frowned. "You're not seriously going in there alone?" "I have to talk to Marcus without Sutton's people controlling the conversation." I checked my sidearm. Not military issue, but Maria's personal weapon, legally registered and temporarily loaned. "I'll be fine." "That's what people say right before they're not fine," Maria grumbled. But she stopped at the corner anyway. I squeezed, her arm reassuringly. "I know what I'm doing." Instead of approaching from the front, I cut through the neighbor's yard and slipped into my former backyard. The willow tree provided perfect cover as I assessed the situation through the kitchen windows. Marcus was pacing in the living room, gesturing animatedly while speaking to a man whose back was to the window. Not Sutton, but someone with similar corporate polish. I moved to the back door, finding it unlocked as it had always been. Some habits die hard. Marcus had never been security conscious. I entered silently, the familiar scent of the house hitting me with unexpected emotional force. Beneath Vanessa's new furniture and decor, this was still the home I'd left behind when I deployed. Voices drifted from the living room. "Completely unacceptable," the stranger was saying. "Sutton is furious. You assured us there would be no complications with the property transfer." How was I supposed to know she'd come back? "And contest it?" Marcus replied, his voice tight with stress. "She was supposed to re-enlist for another 2 years. And the girlfriend? Was she supposed to steal your files and disappear too?" "I'm handling it," Marcus insisted. "Once I find Vanessa—" "Forget the girlfriend," the man cut him off. "It's your wife who's the immediate problem. She was at Hawthorne today, impersonating a state inspector." "What? That's impossible. Rebecca wouldn't—" "She absolutely would," I interjected, stepping into the living room with Maria's pistol held low but visible at my side. "Hello, Marcus." Both men froze. The stranger, young, expensively dressed, with the hard eyes of someone accustomed to intimidation, recovered first, his hand moving subtly toward his jacket. "I wouldn't," I warned, raising the gun slightly. "Military trained, remember?" "I can." "Put a round through your shoulder before you clear your holster." The man's hand stilled. Marcus looked between us, panic evident in his eyes. "Rebecca, what are you doing? Put that away before someone gets hurt." "That depends entirely on your friend here," I replied coolly. "Care to introduce us?" The stranger's mouth twisted with disdain. "David Mercer, Pinnacle Security Consultant." "Corporate euphemism for fixer," I translated. "Here to help Marcus clean up his mess? Or to make sure he doesn't say too much about New Horizons' actual operations?" Mercer's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Confirmation enough. "Rebecca, you need to leave," Marcus urged. "You don't understand what's happening here." "I understand perfectly," I countered. Prescription medication diversion, money laundering through a prison commissary system, shell companies to hide the actual owners and operators. Did I miss anything important, Mr. Mercer? A flash of genuine surprise crossed the fixer's face before his professional mask returned. "Impressive theories. Completely unprovable, of course." "That's exactly what Sutton said," I noted. "Word for word, actually. You might want to vary your script." I kept the gun steady while assessing the room. Despite the tense standoff, I needed to extract Marcus, not escalate the situation into violence. "Marcus, we need to talk. Privately." I nodded toward the back door. "Mr. Mercer can wait here." "He's not going anywhere with you," Mercer stated, flatly. "Actually, I think he is," I replied. "Because Marcus knows what happens next if he doesn't cooperate with me. The court has already frozen the New Horizon assets. The FBI is building a case against Pinnacle, and I have photographs from inside Hawthorne that connect the dots." I met Marcus's eyes directly. "Your only chance for leniency is to work with me now, before Sutton decides you're more useful as a scapegoat than a partner." Marcus paled. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" I pulled out my phone with my free hand and showed him one of the photos I'd taken at Hawthorne, the whiteboard with the NH distribution network clearly visible. "This is just what I gathered in one unauthorized visit. Imagine what federal agents with search warrants will find." Mercer took a step forward. "Give me that phone. Now." I redirected my aim from low ready to center mass. That would be unwise. The standoff stretched for several tense seconds before Marcus broke the silence. "David, give us a minute," he said quietly. "Just wait outside." "You know my instructions," Mercer warned. "I do. And I also know that gunfire in a suburban neighborhood brings police. Immediately." Marcus gestured toward the front door. "Just give us 5 minutes." Mercer assessed the situation, clearly calculating his options before finally giving a curt nod. 5 minutes. Then we finish this Sutton's way. The threat hung in the air as he exited through the front door, pulling it firmly closed behind him. I kept the gun ready. He's not leaving, you know. He's calling for backup. Probably, Marcus agreed, slumping onto the sofa. He looked exhausted, the polished exterior I'd seen at the courthouse now completely eroded. What do you want, Rebecca? I want everything you stole from me. The house, the savings, my share of the investments. I paused. But more than that, I want your shares in New Horizon. His head snapped up. What? Why would you want? Because controlling interest in New Horizon is leverage, I explained. Leverage I can use to make sure Sutton and everyone else involved in this scheme faces justice. You don't understand what you're dealing with, Marcus said, lowering his voice despite us being alone. These people, they're not just white-collar criminals. The money flowing through Hawthorne comes from serious players, international connections, drug, cartels, I surmised, pieces clicking into place. That's why the DEA is involved. He nodded miserably. I didn't know at first. Sutton pitched it as a straightforward investment opportunity, guaranteed returns from government contracts for prison operations. By the time I realized what was really happening, I was already implicated. So you decided to forge Vanessa's signature, make her the liability shield if things went wrong. Marcus couldn't meet my eyes. I needed a fall person. Someone who wouldn't understand the financial structures well enough to realize what was happening. And you sold our house? Emptied our accounts? That was just… What? Spite? No, he said quietly. That was the buy-in. The price kept going up. Sutton said inflation, market adjustments, but it was just extortion. Once they knew I understood what New Horizon really was, they owned me. Despite everything, I felt a flicker of pity for him. Marcus had always been ambitious, always reaching for more, but he'd never been cruel or criminal, at least not the man I'd married. So transfer the shares to me, I said. All of them, Vanessa's too. He laughed bitterly. You think it's that simple? The minute I try to transfer anything, Mercer reports to Sutton and I become a liability that needs to be managed. Not if we do it right, I countered. Not if we make it look like you're following Sutton's plan. Marcus studied me warily. What are you suggesting? Sutton offered me a settlement, cash in exchange for transferring any claim to New Horizon directly to Pinnacle. But he doesn't. Know that the court has already frozen those assets. He can't actually complete that transaction without a judge's approval. Understanding dawned in Marcus's eyes. So if I transfer the shares to you instead of Pinnacle, it appears I'm rejecting the settlement. Meanwhile, you're protected because you can claim you were forced to transfer them as part of the court order from our hearing. I checked my watch. But we need to move quickly. Mercer will have reinforcements here soon. Marcus stood and moved to the small office alcove in the corner of the living room. I can do the electronic transfer now, but Sutton monitors these transactions in real time. The minute it registers, we're both at risk. How long until it processes? Minutes. The system is designed for rapid movement of assets. He logged into a secure portal. Rebecca, you need to understand. Once you control New Horizon, you control the distribution network for millions in diverted pharmaceuticals. People will expect that flow to continue. Let me worry about that, I replied, keeping an eye on the front window. A car had just pulled up behind the black SUV. Just complete the transfer. Marcus's fingers flew across the keyboard. I need authorization codes from my phone. Slowly, I cautioned as he reached for his pocket. He retrieved his phone, entered a series of digits, then returned to the computer, confirming transfer of all Class A shares in New Horizon investments to Rebecca Harlow, effective immediately. He hit enter, then looked up at me. It's done. You now own 51% of New Horizon, which controls the operational contract for Hawthorne. Correctional. I felt no triumph, only a grim determination. Now we need to leave. Separately. There's a blue sedan 2 blocks south. Tell the driver Maria sent you. She'll take you directly to Captain Winters at the JAG office. And you? I need to create a diversion. Make them follow me instead of you. Marcus shook his head. They'll kill you, Rebecca. Once they realize what we've done? They won't, I assured him, though I wasn't nearly as confident as I sounded. Now go. Out the back through the Petersons' yard, then cut across to Maple Street. He hesitated at the back door. I'm sorry. For everything. I never meant for it to go this far. I know, I said, surprised to find I believed him. Now go. Make this right. As Marcus slipped out the back door, I moved to the front window. 2. More men had joined Mercer, all with the same corporate thug appearance. They were discussing something intently, occasionally glancing toward the house. I pulled out my phone and texted Captain Winters. Transfer complete. Marcus en route to you. Extraction needed from secondary location in approximately 20 minutes. His reply came immediately. Understood. Team standing by. Do not engage further. Too late for that, I thought as I surveyed the room, looking for anything. That might be useful. My eyes landed on Marcus's laptop, still logged into the New Horizon portal. On impulse, I sat down and began copying files to a cloud server Captain Winters had set up. Shareholder agreements, operational contracts, distribution, schedules. A hard knock at the front door interrupted my work. Time's up, Reynolds, Mercer called. Decision time. I quickly finished the upload, then closed the laptop. There was no way to reach the back door without being seen through the windows. I needed another exit strategy. The knock came again, harder. Reynolds, open up or we're coming in. I moved to the fireplace, remembering the decorative vent above it that led to the upstairs bathroom, an architectural quirk of the house that had always bothered me but might now prove useful. If I could access the second floor, I could reach the bedroom window that opened onto the garage roof. The front door crashed open as I removed the vent cover. Mercer and his 2 associates burst in, weapons drawn. Where is he? Mercer demanded, scanning the room. I stepped away from the fireplace, keeping my hands visible but still holding Maria's gun. He left. Thought you might be upset about the asset transfer. Mercer's eyes narrowed. What asset transfer? New Horizon shares, all of them. Transferred to me about... I checked my watch. 5 minutes ago, as ordered by the court. That's impossible, one of the other men said. The system requires Sutton's authorization for any transfer exceeding 10%. Apparently not, I replied calmly. Check for yourself. Mercer pulled out his phone, tapped rapidly, then swore viciously. She's telling the truth. All shares transferred to Rebecca Harlow. He looked up at me, cold fury in his eyes. You have no idea what you've done. Actually, I do, I countered. I've gained controlling interest in a company that manages a prison facility where illegal drug distribution and money laundering are occurring. I've documented evidence of these operations. And I've just uploaded all of it to servers the FBI is monitoring in real time. It was a bluff. The FBI wasn't watching the upload, but Mercer had no way of knowing that. Put the gun down, Lieutenant Harlow, he said, his voice dangerously soft. We're going to take a little drive to see Mr. Sutton. Clear up this misunderstanding. I don't think so, I replied, mentally calculating odds and angles. 3 armed men, all focused on me. No clear exit path. My only advantage was the information I now possessed, and the fact that they likely had orders to take me alive for questioning. This isn't a negotiation, Mercer stated flatly. Either you come with us voluntarily, or we take you. Your choice how much it hurts. I forced a calm I didn't feel. Before you make threats, you might want to check what's happening at Hawthorne right now. The diversionary tactic worked. Mercer frowned, then gestured for one of his men to check. The man stepped away, speaking quietly into his phone. "Nothing's happening at Hawthorne," Mercer said confidently. "Are you sure about that?" I asked. Because the moment Marcus transferred those shares, automatic notifications went to certain interested parties, including the DEA task force that's been investigating Pinnacle for months. The second man returned, his expression grim. "There's a situation at the facility. Federal agents at the gate, demanding access." Mercer's face hardened. "Stall them. Standard protocols." He turned back to me. "Impressive, Lieutenant, but ultimately futile. You've just made yourself the most dangerous person in this operation. The people behind Pinnacle don't tolerate that kind of threat." The people behind. "Pinnacle are about to have much bigger problems than me," I replied. "Every document, every transaction, every connection between New Horizon and your distribution network. It's all being analyzed by federal authorities as we speak." It was another bluff, but delivered with enough conviction to plant doubt. Mercer hesitated, clearly recalculating his options. The moment's distraction was all I needed. In one smooth motion, I flung the laptop at the nearest thug, dropped to the floor as Mercer fired a shot that splintered the wall behind me and rolled behind the sofa. Chaos erupted. The men shouted contradicting orders at each other while trying to get a clear shot at me. I crawled rapidly toward the kitchen, keeping the sofa between us as long as possible before making a desperate dash for the hallway. A bullet grazed my arm as I rounded the corner, the sharp burn barely registering. Through the adrenaline, I slammed through the laundry room door and out the side entrance that led to the garage, the exit Marcus and I had used countless times when carrying groceries. Outside, I could hear Mercer organizing his men to cover both sides of the house. I had seconds, not minutes, to disappear. The garage offered no real protection. They'd check it immediately. But the neighboring property had a decorative garden shed that backed against our fence. I sprinted across the darkened yard, vaulted the fence with practiced ease, thank you, military training, and wedged myself into the narrow space behind the shed. Pressing my back against the rough wood, I controlled my breathing and listened as Mercer's men crashed through the garage and surrounding yard. "She's not here," one called. "Must have gone over the back fence." "Spread out," Mercer ordered. "She's on foot and injured. She can't have gone far." Flashlight beams swept the neighboring yards as they expanded their search perimeter. I remained perfectly still, silently calculating how long I needed to stay hidden before attempting to reach the rendezvous point where Captain Winters had promised extraction. My phone vibrated silently in my pocket, a text from an unknown number. In position. Blue garage, 2 houses north. Engine running. Agent Donovan. The FBI had been closer than I'd thought. I waited until the searching men had moved toward the street behind the houses, then crept along the fence line, staying in the shadows of trees and shrubs. The neighboring properties were dark, residents either asleep or wisely staying away from windows given the commotion. The blue garage stood open, a nondescript sedan idling quietly inside. I made a final dash across the exposed driveway and slid into the passenger seat, ducking low as the garage door descended automatically. "Cutting it close, Lieutenant," Agent Donovan commented dryly from the driver's seat. "I count 3 wounds, arm, shoulder, and you're favoring your left leg." "The leg is an old injury," I replied, finally registering the pain from the bullet graze on my arm and what appeared to be a cut on my shoulder from flying glass. "Status on Marcus?" "In protective custody with Captain Winters, cooperating fully, from what I hear." She put the car in gear as the garage door opened again. "We have agents at Hawthorne executing search warrants as we speak. Your distraction with the share transfer created the opening we needed." "And Sutton?" "In the wind, but not for long." We've frozen all Pinnacle accounts and notified TSA, Border Patrol, and port authorities. She drove carefully through the residential streets, avoiding the main roads where Mercer's men would likely be searching. The cartel connections make this a multi-agency priority now. I leaned back, the adrenaline beginning to fade as the reality of the situation settled in. So I now officially own a prison facility involved in drug trafficking. Agent Donovan smiled faintly. Temporarily, yes. Once the investigation concludes, those assets will likely be seized under RICO statutes. But for now, Lieutenant Harlow, you are indeed the controlling shareholder of both Hawthorne Correctional and its parent operation. We drove in silence for several minutes, putting distance between us and Lakeside Avenue. I watched familiar neighborhoods pass by, contemplating how completely my life had changed in the days since my return from deployment. "Where are we headed?" I finally asked. "Secure location outside the city. You'll be debriefed there, receive medical attention, and remain under protection until we've neutralized the immediate threats." She glanced at me. "Your husband's mistress turned up in Arizona, by the way. Local field office is bringing her in for a formal statement. She's as much a victim as I am," I said, surprising myself with the admission. "Marcus set her up from the beginning." "Perhaps," Agent Donovan allowed, "though our background check suggests she's not quite as innocent as she portrayed herself. Her family has connections to several businesses that contract with Pinnacle facilities." This new information settled uncomfortably. Had Vanessa been playing her own angle all along? Was her apparent fear and confusion just another layer of manipulation? "I'd like to speak with her," I decided. "That can be arranged, once you're stabilized, and the immediate situation is contained." As we merged onto the highway heading out of town, I realized I hadn't looked back once at my former home. The house that had once represented everything I'd worked for now felt like just another piece of evidence in a sprawling criminal conspiracy. "You know," Agent Donovan remarked conversationally, "it's not every day someone goes from having their home stolen to owning an entire correctional facility in less than 2 weeks. You've set some kind of record for asset recovery." Despite everything, the pain, the betrayal, the danger still lurking, I found myself smiling faintly. Not exactly how I planned my post-deployment adjustment period. "No," she agreed, "but remarkably effective." The highway stretched before us, dark and empty in the late hours. Behind us, federal agents were dismantling a criminal enterprise that had operated with impunity for years. Somewhere ahead lay answers, justice, and perhaps eventually peace. For now, though, I was content with the knowledge that Marcus's betrayal had backfired in the most spectacular way possible. He'd taken my home while I was deployed serving my country, and I now owned the prison where he might very well spend the next decade of his life. The safe house was a modest farmhouse 30 miles outside the city, surrounded by fields of corn that provided natural cover and clear sightlines in all directions. I'd been here for 3 days, recovering from my injuries while the federal task force executed coordinated raids on Pinnacle facilities across 3 states. My arm was bandaged where the bullet had grazed it, but the wound was superficial. The FBI had installed secure communications equipment in what had once been a dining room, transforming it into an impromptu command center where I'd spent hours debriefing agents on everything I'd learned about Hawthorne and New Horizon. I was reviewing satellite imagery of Hawthorne's layout when Agent Donovan entered with fresh coffee and a tablet. "Morning, Lieutenant," she greeted me. "How's the arm?" "Functional," I replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Any updates on Sutton?" "Still in the wind, but his options are narrowing. We've frozen every account we can find, and his passport has been flagged." She handed me the tablet. "You might be more interested in this. The first comprehensive inventory report from Hawthorne." I scrolled through the document, whistling softly at the figures. Over 3 million in unaccounted for pharmaceuticals in the past year alone. They were running an industrial-scale diversion operation. And that's just one facility, Donovan confirmed. Preliminary findings from the other Pinnacle locations show similar patterns. Conservative estimate puts the total street value around $50 million annually. I shook my head, still processing the scale of the operation. And the inmates? Any evidence of mistreatment beyond the medication issues? Substantial, she said grimly. Medical records were falsified to justify prescriptions, but many inmates received no actual treatment. We're arranging proper care for those with legitimate health issues. She sat across from me. Which brings me to the next item on our agenda. She pulled out an official-looking folder and placed it on the table between us. As the legal controlling shareholder of New Horizon Investments, you have certain responsibilities regarding Hawthorne's operations. I thought those assets would be frozen during the investigation, I said, eyeing the folder warily. Eventually, yes. But the judicial process takes time, and meanwhile, Hawthorne houses over 800 inmates who need supervision, meals, and essential services. I frowned. You're not suggesting I actually run the prison? Not personally, Donovan clarified. But as the controlling interest holder, you have the authority to appoint interim management and establish operational protocols until the federal receivership process is complete. Which could take months, I surmised, possibly longer. These cases are complex, especially with ongoing criminal investigations. I leaned back, considering the bizarre twist of fate. When I'd returned from deployment to find my house sold and my husband playing house with another woman, I never imagined I'd end up responsible for hundreds of incarcerated individuals. What about the current management team? I asked. Most of the senior leadership has been detained or placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The facility is currently being overseen by federal corrections specialists, but they lack the legal authority to make significant operational changes. Changes like what? Donovan leaned forward. Like implementing a transparent medication tracking system. Like reviewing cases of inmates who might have been given excessive sentences to maintain Hawthorne's occupancy rates. Like dismantling the exploitative labor programs that were providing kickbacks to Pinnacle executives. I understood now. This wasn't just about maintaining basic operations. It was an opportunity to begin reforming a corrupted system from within. What exactly do you need from me? Your signature on these documents, she replied, opening the folder to reveal a stack of legal papers. They appoint a new interim warden, someone with impeccable credentials and no connections to Pinnacle, and authorize a comprehensive audit of all Hawthorne operations. I scanned the documents, noting the name of the proposed warden, Dr. James Whitmore, 25 years with the Federal Bureau of Prisons, specializing in rehabilitation programs, retired 3 years ago but willing to step in during the transition. He's worked with the DOJ on several prison reform initiatives. It made sense. The prison needed proper leadership during this chaotic period, and I certainly wasn't qualified to provide it. Still, something made me hesitate. Before I sign anything, I want to visit Hawthorne again, officially this time. See the actual conditions, speak with staff who weren't involved in the illegal operations. Donovan considered this for a moment. That can be arranged, though I should warn you, Hawthorne is a different place now than when you sneaked in. The raid was thorough and disruptive. All the more reason for me to see it, I insisted. I'm not signing over control without understanding exactly what I'm responsible for. She nodded, respecting my decision. I'll make the arrangements. We can go tomorrow morning. And Vanessa? I asked. You mentioned bringing her in for questioning. She's being interviewed at our Arizona field office today. Initial assessment suggests she was more involved than she claimed, though less than Marcus. Her family connections to Pinnacle's supply chain companies raised significant questions. I shook my head, wondering how I could have missed so many red flags. I want to speak with her. That's still being evaluated, Donovan replied carefully. Her testimony could be crucial in building cases against higher-level operatives. All the more reason to let me talk to her, I argued. She opened up to me before. She might again, especially now that the operation is exposed. Donovan made a note on her phone. I'll discuss it with the case supervisor. No promises. As she gathered her materials to leave, she paused at the door. One more thing. Your JAG officer, Captain Winters, called. The civil proceedings regarding your house and personal assets have been expedited given the criminal nature of Marcus's activities. The judge has ruled in your favor on all counts, a small victory amid the larger chaos. So I get my house back. And full restitution for all financial damages, plus punitive considerations. She smiled faintly, though at this point, owning a prison facility rather overshadows a lakeside property dispute. After she left, I stood by the window, looking out over the cornfield surrounding the safe house. In the distance, a storm was gathering, dark clouds piling against the horizon. It felt appropriately symbolic for the situation. One storm past, another approaching. My phone buzzed with a message from Maria. Still alive? I smiled despite everything. Barely. You? Bored. Base duty while you're out playing prison warden. When can I visit? Soon. Things still unsettled. We'll call when safe. I set the phone down, turning my attention back to the satellite images of Hawthorne. If I was going to be temporarily responsible for the facility, I needed to understand its layout and operations completely. No more surprises. The next morning, Agent Donovan drove me to Hawthorne in an unmarked FBI vehicle. The approach was dramatically different from my previous visit. No need for forged credentials or cover stories. Federal agents nodded respectfully as we passed through the front gate, which now featured additional security personnel. We've maintained a full FBI presence since the raid, Donovan explained as we parked. The facility is secure, but tensions are high. Many staff members are uncertain about their futures. Inside, the administration building buzzed with unfamiliar activity. FBI agents conducted interviews in glass-walled offices, while corrections officers moved about with a wary alertness that hadn't been present during my undercover visit. We were met by a tall, distinguished man with silver hair and intelligent eyes. Lieutenant Harlow? I'm Special Agent Paul Richardson, tactical lead for the Hawthorne operation. Thank you for accommodating this visit, I replied, shaking his hand. Of course. As the controlling shareholder, you have every right to inspect the facility. He gestured toward a conference room. I've prepared a briefing on our findings so far. Then we can tour any areas you wish to see. The conference room had been transformed into a war room of sorts with evidence boards covering the walls and computer stations monitoring every area of the prison. Richardson closed the door behind us and activated a privacy screen on the windows. What you're about to see is restricted information, he warned. Part of an ongoing federal investigation. The briefing was comprehensive and disturbing. Photos documented sophisticated hiding places for diverted medications, falsified medical records, and evidence of funds flowing through the commissary system into shell companies. But what truly shocked me were the images of inmate living conditions: overcrowded cells, substandard food, inadequate medical care. How was this allowed to continue? I asked, examining a chart showing systematic understaffing in critical areas while administrative positions were overallocated. Private prison contracts often lack rigorous oversight, Richardson explained. Inspections were announced well in advance, giving Hawthorne time to create temporary improvements that disappeared as soon as inspectors left. And no one spoke up? 800 inmates, hundreds of staff, not one whistleblower? There were a few, Donovan interjected. Like Private Cooper. They were systematically silenced, either through intimidation, termination, or worse. Richardson nodded grimly. We've identified at least 5 suspicious deaths connected to individuals who raised concerns about Hawthorne's operations. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on my shoulders. Through a bizarre twist of fate, I now held the power to begin changing this system. at least until the federal receivership process was complete. I want to see everything, I decided, starting with the medical unit where the diversion occurred. Richardson led us through the facility, past cells where inmates watched curiously as our group passed. The atmosphere was noticeably different from my previous visit, less oppressive somehow, as if the exposure of corruption had lifted a shadow from the place. The medical unit had been completely overhauled. FBI evidence technicians were still processing the dispensary, while a team of independent medical professionals reviewed patient records. We've already identified over 200 inmates who were prescribed medications they never received, Richardson explained as we observed the work. Some have serious health conditions that went untreated while their prescriptions were diverted. Have they received proper care now? I asked. That process has begun. We brought in doctors from the VA system to conduct thorough evaluations and establish legitimate treatment plans. We continued to the commissary, where the money laundering operation had centered. Agents were meticulously examining financial records, tracking how inmate funds and family contributions had been siphoned into the criminal enterprise. The commissary charged inmates up to 5 times market rate for basic necessities, Richardson explained. Those inflated profits were then combined with the proceeds from the medication diversion scheme and laundered through New Horizons accounts. And New Horizon distributed the medications back into the street market, I concluded. Exactly. A perfect closed-loop system, money in, drugs out, all under the guise of legitimate prison operations. Our tour continued through the facility, the kitchen where food quality had been systematically degraded to cut costs, the workshops where inmates produced goods for pennies per hour that were sold at premium prices, the visitation area where family members were charged exorbitant fees for basic contact with their incarcerated loved ones. By the time we returned to the administration building, I had seen enough. The systemic exploitation was even worse than I'd imagined, a calculated operation designed to extract maximum profit from human suffering. I'll sign the interim management documents, I told Donovan. Dr. Whitmore can take over operational control. Immediately. She produced the folder from earlier, and I signed the authorization papers without further hesitation. But I added a condition. I want to be kept informed of all significant operational changes, and I want to be directly involved in the transition to federal receivership. That's unusual, Richardson noted. Most shareholders in your position would be distancing themselves as quickly as possible. I'm not most shareholders, I replied. I didn't seek this position, but now that I have it, I intend to use it constructively. As we prepared to leave, Officer Wilson, the guard who had escorted me during my undercover visit and warned me about Cooper, approached hesitantly. Lieutenant Harlow, could I speak with you for a moment? Donovan gave me a questioning look, but I nodded. It's fine. He tried to warn me during my previous visit. Wilson led us to a quiet corner, his expression grave. I wanted you to know. Some of us tried to report what was happening. Cooper wasn't the only one. But the system was rigged against us. Anyone who spoke up disappeared, transferred, fired, or worse. I understand, I assured him. The federal investigation will sort out who was complicit and who was coerced. He glanced around nervously. That's not why I wanted to talk to you. It's about Sutton. Word among the guards is that he had a contingency plan if Hawthorne was ever raided, a scorched earth protocol. Donovan stepped closer. What kind of protocol? I don't know details, Wilson admitted, but it involved something hidden in the old warden's office, behind the bookcase. Cooper found it before he died. Donovan immediately radioed Richardson, who met us at the warden's office minutes later. The room had already been searched thoroughly during the raid, but based on Wilson's information, they now focused on the built-in bookcase covering the back wall. It took less than an hour for the FBI's forensic team to discover the hidden compartment. Inside was a fireproof safe containing a hard drive, paper documents, and a ledger with handwritten entries. This could be the mother lode, Richardson breathed, carefully bagging the evidence. Contingency plans often contain comprehensive documentation to use as leverage if things go wrong, or to destroy specific individuals who might testify, Donovan added. The contents were immediately transported to a secure FBI facility for analysis, with Richardson promising to share any relevant findings as soon as possible. As we finally left Hawthorne, I felt both drained and oddly energized. The corruption had been even more extensive than I'd imagined, but now there was a clear path forward to begin rectifying the damage. "What happens now?" I asked Donovan as we drove away from the prison. "Dr. Whitmore will arrive tomorrow to begin the transition. The FBI maintains operational security while the investigation continues. And you," she glanced at me, "officially become the interim authority responsible for Hawthorne's rehabilitation." "Not exactly what I expected when I returned from deployment," I remarked dryly. "Life rarely follows expected paths, Lieutenant, especially when you've been betrayed by those closest to you." We rode in silence for several miles before she spoke. Again. "There's been a development regarding Vanessa. The Arizona interview revealed significant inconsistencies in her story. We've arranged for her transfer to our field office here. You'll have your opportunity to speak with her tomorrow." I nodded, contemplating what questions I would ask the woman who had been living in my house, sleeping with my husband, and potentially involved in a criminal enterprise that had exploited hundreds of vulnerable people. "And Marcus?" I asked. "Has he provided useful information?" "Very. His cooperation has been enthusiastic. Apparently, the possibility of a reduced sentence is quite motivating." I wasn't surprised. Self-preservation had always been Marcus's primary instinct. As we approached the safe house, Donovan's phone rang. She answered, listening intently before her expression sharpened. "When? Are you certain?" She listened again. "Lock down the analysis team. No one in or out until I arrive." She hung up, immediately making a U-turn on the rural road. "Change of plans," she informed me tersely. The hard drive from Sutton's safe contained encrypted files that just finished processing. They include detailed records of payoffs to government officials, judges, and inspection personnel who facilitated Hawthorne's operations. That's good, right? More evidence against the conspiracy. Yes, but it also means more powerful people have been implicated. People with the resources and motivation to obstruct the investigation. She accelerated down the highway. "I'm taking you to a different secure location while we assess the new threat landscape." I processed this latest development, understanding that the conspiracy surrounding Hawthorne was expanding beyond a prison-based criminal operation into the realm of systemic corruption, potentially reaching the highest levels of local government. "How high does this go?" I asked. "We won't know until the files are fully analyzed, but based on the reaction from my superiors, very high indeed." The implications were staggering. What had begun as a personal betrayal, a husband selling our house while I was deployed, had led to the exposure of corruption that potentially infected the entire regional justice system. And at the center of it all was Hawthorne Correctional Facility, a prison I now effectively owned. Night was falling. As we sped toward an uncertain destination, the landscapes of my old life receding in the rearview mirror. Whatever came next would be uncharted territory, a mission unlike any I'd undertaken before. But one thing was certain. I would see it through to the end. 3 months later, I stood at the edge of the lake behind my house. My real house, the one I'd finally reclaimed, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and crimson. The dock had been repaired, the willow tree pruned, and all traces of Marcus and Vanessa's brief occupation erased. The doorbell rang, interrupting my moment of peace. Maria and Captain Winters waited on the porch, both in civilian clothes for the small gathering I'd arranged. "Quite the view," Maria commented, stepping inside. "Worth fighting for." "Worth more than the house," Captain Winters added, handing me a file folder. The final settlement documents. Judge Norton has approved all terms. I led them to the living room where Agent Donovan, now just Claire, since we'd become friends, through this ordeal, was setting out drinks. "Is it official?" she asked, seeing the folder. "Completely," I confirmed. "Hawthorne Correctional is now officially in federal receivership. My temporary stewardship is formally concluded." "To liberation," Maria toasted, raising her glass. "Both yours and the inmates." We clinked glasses, celebrating the culmination of a tumultuous journey. The evidence from Sutton's hidden cache had proven explosive, implicating 2 judges, a state senator, and numerous local officials in the corruption surrounding Hawthorne and other Pinnacle facilities. The investigation had expanded into a multi-agency federal task force examining private prison operations nationwide. "Any word on Sutton?" Claire asked. "Picked up in Belize yesterday," Captain Winters replied. "Apparently, his contingency plan didn't include adequate offshore banking. Once the accounts were frozen, he ran out of options." "And Vanessa?" Maria inquired delicately. "Plea deal," I said, still conflicted about the woman who'd been both victim and accomplice. Our confrontation in the FBI interrogation room had revealed a complex reality. She'd known about Marcus's marriage, but had believed his lies about impending divorce. She'd suspected something illicit about New Horizon, but hadn't understood the full scope until too late. Then fear had kept her involved, especially after discovering her family's supply companies were unwittingly part of the scheme. "Reduced sentence in exchange for testimony against higher-ups," Claire elaborated. 2 years, minimum security, with probation afterward. "And Marcus?" Captain Winters asked the question everyone had been tiptoeing around. 15 years, I said flatly. Would have been 25 without his cooperation. He's being held at Federal Correctional Institution, Petersburg, far from any Pinnacle-connected facility. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. The husband who had taken my home while I was deployed was now housed in a prison himself, while I had briefly controlled the very system he'd invested in. After dinner, we moved to the back porch overlooking the lake. The conversation shifted to the reforms now being implemented at Hawthorne under Dr. Whitmore's leadership. Transparent medication tracking systems, fair pricing in the commissary, educational programs for inmates, decent wages for prison labor. The Justice Department is using Hawthorne as a model for reform in 5 other former Pinnacle facilities, Claire reported. "Your brief tenure as prison owner may have lasting impact." "I just pointed out the obvious problems," I demurred. "Dr. Whitmore and the federal oversight team did the real work." "Don't undersell yourself," Captain Winters admonished. "You turned a personal injustice into systemic change. Not many people would have pursued it as thoroughly as you did." As the evening wound down and my guests departed, I returned to the dock alone, contemplating how completely my life had transformed in just a few months. From combat medic to betrayed wife to accidental prison reformer, it wasn't a path I could have possibly anticipated. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Thank you, Cooper's sister." I smiled, remembering the memorial service. We'd organized for Private Cooper once his death had been officially reclassified from suicide to homicide. His family finally had closure, and the corruption he'd died exposing had been dismantled. Another message arrived, this one from Dr. Whitmore. "Board approved all rehabilitation program funding. Implementation begins Monday. Still willing to consult?" I typed back my affirmative response. Though my official role at Hawthorne had ended, I'd agreed to serve as a civilian advisor to the reform initiative. My military medical training and first-hand knowledge of the facility's problems provided a unique perspective that Dr. Whitmore valued. The VA hospital had also offered me a position in their administrative team, focusing on veteran care coordination, work that would allow me to continue serving my community while processing my own experiences. As darkness settled over the lake, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me here. Marcus had betrayed me, attempting to erase me from my own life while I was overseas serving our country. He'd sold our house, emptied our accounts, and invested in a corrupt prison system that exploited society's most vulnerable. Yet through his betrayal, I'd found unexpected purpose. The skills I'd honed in the military, strategic thinking, crisis management, unwavering determination, had served me well in exposing a criminal enterprise that might otherwise have continued unchecked for years. I still occasionally struggled with nightmares, not just from my deployment, but from the confrontation with Mercer and his men, from the knowledge of how close I'd come to becoming another unfortunate accident, like Private Cooper. But those moments were balanced by the satisfaction of knowing that hundreds of inmates now received proper medical care, fair treatment, and genuine rehabilitation opportunities. Tomorrow, I would begin packing up the last of Marcus's belongings for donation. The house was mine again, not just legally but in spirit. I'd reclaimed my space, my future, my agency. And ironically, I now owned something far more valuable than the lakeside property Marcus had tried to steal. The knowledge that one person, standing firm against injustice, could create ripples of change that extended far beyond personal vindication. My husband's mistress had taken my home while I was deployed, and for a brief, consequential moment, I had owned their prison facility. Justice, it seemed, had its own peculiar symmetry. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.